I'm Debra, 30 female. I live in a quiet apartment on the third floor of a brick building, the kind with big windows that let in the afternoon light perfectly. By day, I'm a technical writer, which means I spend my time translating complicated engineering jargon into plain English that anyone can understand. A skill that, ironically, I could never seem to apply to my own family's dynamics. My life has always been orderly, predictable, and quiet, which is exactly how I liked it. Or so I thought, until a single day shattered that quiet and revealed that the entire foundation of my life, the very definition of my family, was a carefully constructed lie. This is the story of how my 30th birthday party wasn't for me, and how a DNA test I took on a whim became the key to unlocking a secret that would burn my old life to the ground. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The week leading up to my 30th birthday felt strange. In my family, birthdays were usually a muted affair, especially mine. A polite card from my parents, Arthur and Margaret, a generic gift card, and maybe a quiet dinner at a restaurant of their choosing. My sister Vanessa's birthdays, on the other hand, were always grand events. Themed parties, weekend trips, extravagant gifts that she would show off with a practiced, almost apologetic glee. She was the sun, I was the planet orbiting her, content to exist in her gravitational pull because it was the only system I had ever known. But this year, for my big 3-0, there was a peculiar silence. My parents deflected my questions about dinner plans with vague smiles and noncommittal phrases like, "Oh, we'll figure something out, dear." Vanessa just gave me a knowing smirk whenever I brought it up. My best friend, Chloe, was the only one who seemed to share my confusion. "It's weird," she'd said over coffee. "A 30th is a big deal. You'd think they'd at least book a table somewhere." I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were just busy. My father, a civil engineer, was always wrapped up in some massive city project, and my mother was constantly redecorating a client's home, her passion for interior design leaving little room for anything else. Vanessa, a brand strategist, lived a life that seemed to be a continuous series of urgent meetings and glamorous launch events. I was the quiet one, the technical writer who worked from home, whose biggest professional thrill was a perfectly formatted user manual. My life lacked the flash and dazzle of theirs, a fact I had long since accepted. Still, a part of me, a hopeful, naive part, began to wonder. What if their silence was intentional? What if, for the first time, they were planning something special for me? A surprise party. The thought made my stomach flutter. All my life, I had watched Vanessa be the center of attention. Perhaps this time, just this once, it would be my turn. The day of my birthday arrived, and the silence from my family was deafening. I received a simple, "Happy birthday" text from my mom in the morning, but no other details. I spent the day trying to work, my focus shot, my eyes darting to my phone every few minutes. Chloe took me out for a birthday lunch where I confessed my silly little theory about a surprise party. She looked skeptical but squeezed my hand. "Well, you deserve one," she said warmly. "After all the years you've quietly cheered for everyone else, it's about time they threw some confetti for you." Her words were a balm, but the seed of hope had already taken root. By late afternoon, my anxiety was a humming wire. Then, finally, a call from my dad. "Debra," he said, his voice cheerful and brisk. "Your mother and I were thinking we'd just do something casual here at the house tonight. Can you come over around 7? Casual at the house." My heart pounded. This was it. The classic surprise party setup. They were trying to throw me off the scent. I could barely contain my excitement. "Of course, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'll be there." I spent the next 2 hours getting ready, a ridiculous, giddy energy coursing through me. I chose a new dress, a simple but elegant navy blue one that Chloe had helped me pick out. I did my hair, put on makeup, and even spritzed on the expensive perfume I saved for special occasions. As I drove to my parents' house, a sprawling suburban home that always felt more like a showroom than a place people actually lived, I practiced my surprised face in the rearview mirror. I imagined walking in, the lights flicking on, and a chorus of surprise from family and friends. I imagined my parents smiling, truly seeing me for once. I imagined Vanessa, for once, standing in the crowd instead of at the center of it. It was a foolish, childish fantasy, but it felt so real, so close. I could almost taste the birthday cake. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a few cars I didn't recognize parked along the street. My heart did a little leap. It was happening. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the stone path to the front door. I could hear the low murmur of conversation and music from inside. I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I was ready. I turned the knob and pushed the door open, stepping into the brightly lit foyer. The chatter in the living room died down for a second. A few heads turned. My mother appeared, a strained smile on her face. "Debra, you're here," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. She gave me a quick, airy kiss on the cheek. But there was no shout of surprise. The guests, a mix of my parents, friends, and some of Vanessa's colleagues I barely knew, just gave me polite, slightly confused nods before turning back to their conversations. The house was decorated, but the colors were all wrong: gold and black, sleek and corporate, nothing like the soft blues and greens I loved. On a large banner strung across the fireplace, bold letters spelled out, "Congratulations," my smile faltered. My father walked over, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Glad you could make it, kiddo," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Big night for your sister." My stomach turned to ice. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. The surprise party I had spent all day dreaming about was real. It just wasn't for me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I stood frozen in the foyer, the navy blue dress suddenly feeling like a costume for a play I had misread the script for. "Her sister," my dad had said. I looked past him into the living room, and there she was, Vanessa. She was holding court in the center of the room, radiant in a shimmering gold dress that matched the decorations perfectly. She was laughing, her head thrown back, as one of her coworkers told an animated story. People orbited her, drawn in by her effortless charisma. She was the sun, and the party was her solar system. My 30th birthday was just a passing comet, barely visible in her magnificent sky. My mother, Margaret, seemed to notice my paralysis. She gently took my arm, her grip surprisingly firm, and steered me toward the kitchen. "I know, dear," she whispered, her voice a low, conspiratorial hush. "We were going to tell you. It's just that Vanessa got the promotion to senior brand strategist this week, and we're all so proud. It was all very last minute, and it seemed silly to have two separate celebrations so close together. We're celebrating both of you tonight. It's a joint party." A joint party. I looked around the room again. There was no mention of my birthday anywhere. No happy 30th banner, no second cake, not a single balloon that wasn't black or gold. The "congratulations" banner was clearly for Vanessa. The cake on the dining table, an elaborate multi-layered confection, was topped with a fondant sculpture of her company's logo. It was the most transparent lie my mother had ever told me, and the fact that she expected me to believe it, to simply smile and accept it, was like a physical blow. A joint party where only one person was being celebrated. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over me. I felt my face flush, a deep, burning red that I prayed no one would notice in the dim lighting. I wanted to turn and walk out the door, to drive away and never look back. But I couldn't. The years of conditioning, of being the quiet, agreeable daughter, were too strong, so I did what I always did. I swallowed my feelings, forced a brittle smile, and nodded. "Oh," I said, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. "Of course, that's wonderful for Vanessa." My mother beamed, relieved. "I knew you, understand, dear. You've always been so mature." Mature. The word felt like an insult. It was their code for uncomplaining. I spent the next hour drifting through the party like a ghost. I got myself a glass of water from the kitchen because the thought of celebratory champagne made me want to be sick. I made polite, meaningless conversation with people who, upon learning I was the sister, would give me a pitying look before quickly changing the subject back to Vanessa's incredible achievement. I heard snippets of their praise floating around me. "She's such a go-getter. Destined for big things, that one. Arthur and Margaret must be so proud." Each comment was a small paper cut on my already wounded pride. I found a corner near the back patio door and just stood there, watching. I watched my father, Arthur, his chest puffed out with pride, recounting the story of Vanessa's rapid rise through her company to anyone who would listen. I watched my mother flit from group to group, her face glowing, accepting congratulations as if the promotion were her own. And I watched Vanessa. She was in her element, soaking up the adoration, at 1p. Oint, she caught my eye from across the room. She raised her glass to me with a little smirk, a gesture that didn't feel congratulatory or inclusive. It felt like a victory lap. It felt like she was saying, "See, this is how it is. This is how it will always be." In that moment, the years of subtle slights, of forgotten achievements and overlooked milestones, all coalesced into a single, painful realization. It wasn't just that they preferred her. It was that I was, to them, an afterthought. My existence was secondary to hers. The climax of the evening and the final nail in the coffin of my dignity came when my father tapped a glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. The room fell silent. "I'd just like to say a few words," he began, beaming at Vanessa. He gave a long, flowery speech about her ambition, her brilliance, her incredible work ethic. He talked about how she had made the family name proud. He ended by raising his glass. "So let's all toast to my amazing daughter Vanessa on her incredible success. We love you so much." A chorus of "To Vanessa" echoed through the house. Glasses clinked, people cheered, and in the entire 5-minute speech, my name was never mentioned. My 30th birthday was not even a footnote. I couldn't breathe. The air in the room was thick with my own irrelevance. I felt dizzy, disoriented, as if I were watching my life from outside my own body. While everyone was distracted, congratulating Vanessa again, I slipped out the patio door into the cool night air. No one saw me go. No one called out my name. I walked down the driveway, my heels sinking into the soft grass, and got into my car. I didn't even look back. As I drove away from the house, from the golden glow of the party celebrating my sister, the tears I had been holding back finally came. They weren't just tears of sadness or disappointment. They were tears of rage. A deep, cold rage that had been simmering beneath the surface for 30 years. The quiet, agreeable daughter was gone. I didn't know who was in her place yet, but I knew she would never again stand silently in the shadows while her life was ignored. I drove home on autopilot, the familiar streets of my neighborhood a blur through my tear-filled eyes. Each stoplight, each turn was emotion disconnected from my thoughts, which were a chaotic storm of humiliation and anger. When I finally reached my apartment building, I just sat in the car in the dark parking lot, the engine off, the silence amplifying the roaring in my head. A joint party. The lie was so audacious, so insulting. It would have been kinder to just forget my birthday entirely. The pretense that they were celebrating me too was a special kind of cruelty, designed to make me feel ungrateful if I complained. I finally dragged myself out of the car and up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment. The moment I closed the door behind me, the facade of strength I had maintained crumbled completely. I slid down the door and sobbed, deep, gut-wrenching sobs for the little girl who never got the big party, for the teenager whose academic awards were always overshadowed by her sister's social victories, and for the 30-year-old woman who had just been rendered invisible by her own family. After my tears were spent, I was left with a hollow, aching emptiness. I pushed myself up and walked numbly through my quiet apartment. The life I had built for myself, my books arranged by color, my neat workspace, my small but thriving collection of houseplants, had always been a source of comfort. It was my sanctuary from the casual neglect of my family. But tonight, it just felt empty. A monument to a life lived on the sidelines. Aimlessly, I walked to the small table by the door where I dropped my mail. I hadn't checked it in a couple of days, too caught up in the false hope of my impending birthday celebration. I sorted through the usual junk mail and bills, my mind still replaying the scene at the party. Then, my fingers brushed against a thick, crisp envelope. It was from Genesis Labs, a commercial DNA testing company. I stared at it, my mind blank for a moment. Then I remembered. About 6 weeks ago, Chloe and I had been talking about ancestry. She had done a test and found out she had a fascinating mix of Scandinavian and Scottish heritage. On a whim, fueled by a 2-for-1 discount code, I had bought a kit too. I was curious about my own background, hoping to find something interesting, something that was uniquely mine, not tied to the family that so often felt alien to me. I had spit into the little tube, mailed it off, and promptly forgotten all about it. The envelope contained a glossy brochure and a single sheet of paper with instructions on how to access my results online. A small, bitter laugh escaped my lips. On a day when my family had shown me exactly where I stood, here was a report that would tell me where I came from. The irony was palpable. With nothing else to do, I took the paper to my laptop, sat on my couch, and typed in the website. I entered the unique kit number and my password. My results page loaded, a colorful pie chart showing my ethnic breakdown, mostly Northwestern European, a predictable mix of English, Irish, and German. It was mildly interesting, but not the earth-shattering revelation I half-jokingly hoped for. I clicked around the dashboard, exploring the different features. There was a section for DNA relatives. I knew some of my cousins had used the same service, so I expected to see a few familiar names pop up. The page loaded, and I saw a list of second and third cousins, distant relatives I had never met. Then I saw a name under the immediate family category. Vanessa. Of course. She must have done a test at some point too. It was exactly the kind of trendy thing she would do. But it was the label next to her name that made my blood run cold. It didn't say sister. It said half-sister. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system. Half-sister? It was impossible. We had the same parents, Arthur and Margaret. We grew up in the same house. This was a billion-dollar company. Surely they didn't make errors this massive. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the shared match details. The site provided a clinical, scientific explanation. It estimated our shared DNA at 1,750 centimorgans, a typical amount for paternal half-siblings. Paternal. The word leaped off the screen. It meant we shared a father but not a mother. My father, Arthur, the man who had just toasted Vanessa as his amazing daughter while completely ignoring my existence. The implications of that single word, paternal, crashed down on me with the force of a tidal wave. If we shared a father but not a mother, and Margaret was my mother, then Margaret was not Vanessa's mother. This meant my father, Arthur, had had an affair, and Vanessa was the result. The room began to spin. Every memory of my childhood was instantly cast in a new, sinister light. My mother's subtle but persistent favoritism toward Vanessa, was it overcompensation? Guilt. My father's extravagant praise for her, was it a way to assuage his own conscience? The way they always presented themselves as the perfect, idyllic family, was it all just an elaborate performance to cover up this monumental, 30-year-old lie? The joint party wasn't just an act of carelessness. It felt like a continuation of the same lie. They celebrated Vanessa so loudly, so publicly, perhaps to convince themselves as much as everyone else that she belonged. And I, the quiet, legitimate daughter, was the constant, inconvenient reminder of the truth. I was living proof of the family that should have been, and my presence threatened the fragile fiction they had built. The DNA result wasn't just a piece of data. It was a key. It was the explanation for every slight, every moment of feeling like an outsider in my own home. My humiliation at the party was no longer just about a forgotten birthday. It was a symptom of a much deeper, more poisonous betrayal that had been festering at the heart of my family for my entire life. For a long time, I just sat there, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my stunned face. The words paternal half-sister were burned into my retinas. My mind, usually so adept at creating order from chaos, was a maelstrom of confusion, betrayal, and a white-hot anger that was beginning to eclipse the shock. A 30-year lie. My entire life, my entire understanding of my family, had been a fraud. The first person I thought of was Chloe. I needed an anchor, a logical mind to help me process the unthinkable. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. It was late, but I knew she'd answer. "Debra, are you okay?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep but instantly alert with concern. "I saw you left the party. I was worried." The dam broke. In a torrent of frantic, whispered words, I told her everything. The party, the humiliation, the DNA test, the impossible result. I expected her to be skeptical, to suggest it was a mistake. But Chloe, a pharmacist, had a deep respect for science. She was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Okay, she said finally, her voice calm and steady. Okay, Debra, let's think this through. Are you absolutely sure the test is accurate? They say they're 99.9% accurate, I choked out. And the shared DNA amount. It's exactly in the range for half-siblings. Paternal half-siblings. Paternal, she repeated softly. So Arthur is your father and her father, but Margaret is your mother. But not Vanessa's. The way she laid it out so plainly made it terrifyingly real. This means your dad had an affair, Chloe continued, her voice gentle but firm. And Vanessa was born from it. And your mom knows, she must. She raised Vanessa as her own. The thought of my mother's complicity was almost harder to bear than my faith. Infidelity. Margaret, the woman who was supposed to protect me, had actively participated in a lie that placed her husband's illegitimate child on a pedestal while her own daughter was pushed into the shadows. Was it penance? Was it a desperate attempt to keep her marriage together? Whatever the reason, it was a betrayal of a depth I could barely comprehend. What do I do, Chloe? I whispered, feeling like a lost child. For now, you do nothing, she said. You don't confront them, not yet. You need more than just a DNA result. You need context. You need to think back. Has anything ever seemed off? Hanging up the phone, her words echoed in my mind. Think back. I spent the rest of the night and the entire next day combing through the archives of my memory, re-examining my life through this new, horrifying lens. And once I started looking, the clues were everywhere. I remembered being a child, maybe 7 or 8, and asking my mother why Vanessa didn't have baby pictures in the family albums like I did. My mother had laughed it off, saying, "Oh, the camera was broken that year, sweetie. Such a shame." A broken camera for an entire year? It was a flimsy excuse, but as a child, I had accepted it. I thought about how my maternal grandparents, who passed away when I was a teenager, had always treated me with a warmth that never quite extended to Vanessa. Their gifts to me were personal and thoughtful, while Vanessa's were always polite, generic, and accompanied by a slightly strained smile. At the time, I thought they just didn't connect with her personality. Now, I realized they knew. They must have known she wasn't their real grandchild. Then there were the medical histories. I recalled a time in college when I had to fill out a detailed family medical history form for a doctor's appointment. My mother had sat down with me and carefully listed everything on her side of the family: the heart conditions, the allergies, the rare blood type. When Vanessa had asked for the same information a few years later, I vaguely remembered my mom being evasive, just telling her to put unknown for most of her maternal history. It was a tiny, insignificant detail then, but now it was a blaring alarm bell. The biggest piece of the puzzle, however, was the financial disparity. My parents had paid for my college education, but it came with lectures about budgeting and the expectation that I would work part-time. When Vanessa went to college 2 years later, they not only paid her full tuition at a more expensive private university, but also bought her a brand new car as a graduation present. My father had always said it was because his business was doing better by then. But was that the real reason? Or was he funneling money to Vanessa out of a deep-seated guilt, trying to buy his way out of his original sin? The more I thought, the clearer the picture became. The constant, almost desperate praise for Vanessa wasn't just parental pride, it was a performance. It was a conscious effort to legitimize her, to cement her place in the family so firmly that no one would ever question it. And my role in this twisted family drama, I was the control group, the legitimate daughter. My quiet, unassuming presence was the perfect backdrop against which Vanessa's manufactured brilliance could shine. They didn't just neglect me, they used my quietness, my unwillingness to cause a scene, as a tool to maintain their lie. Every time I had swallowed my disappointment, every time I had stepped aside to let Vanessa have the spotlight, I had been an unwitting accomplice to their deception. My anger, which had been a raging fire, began to cool and harden into something else. It became cold, sharp, and focused. This wasn't just about a forgotten birthday anymore. It was about 30 years of lies. They had built their perfect family on a foundation of deceit, and I had been sacrificed to keep it standing. Well, the foundation was about to crumble, and I was going to be the one to light the match. The week after my birthday was the quietest, and yet the most turbulent of my life. I didn't answer my parents' calls. After a couple of days, the calls turned to texts. "Debra, are you all right? We're worried." Was it the party? You know we love you. Please call us. Each message was a drop of poison, their feigned concern more insulting than their neglect. Vanessa sent a single, smug text. Hey, sorry you had to leave early. The party was amazing. Talk soon. I deleted it without a reply. I needed space to think, to let the anger settle into a coherent plan. My initial impulse was to send them a screenshot of the DNA results and let the chaos erupt. But Chloe, my ever-practical voice of reason, talked me out of it. A text is too easy for them to dismiss, she argued during one of our late-night calls. They'll say the website is fake. They'll try to gaslight you. You have one shot to do this, Debra. You need to do it in a way they can't ask. Ape or deny, you need to choose the time and the place. She was right. For 30 years, they had controlled the narrative. They had decided what was true, who was important, and how the family story was told. Now, it was my turn to be the author. I needed a stage. A place where the facade of their perfect family was at its most polished, its most impenetrable. The answer came to me in the form of an embossed invitation that arrived in the mail a few days later. It was for my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. They were hosting a lavish dinner party at an upscale restaurant, a celebration of their long and unbreakable union. The guest list would include their closest friends, a few business associates of my father, and of course, their beloved daughters. It was perfect. It was a monument to their lie, a public declaration of a love that had been tainted by infidelity from its earliest years. What better place to reveal the truth than at a party celebrating the very marriage that my father had betrayed? The irony was so poetic, it was almost beautiful. My plan began to take shape. It wouldn't be a screaming match. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I had spent my life being the quiet, reasonable one, and I would use that to my advantage. My weapon would be the truth, delivered with the calm, methodical precision of a technical writer laying out undeniable facts. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. First, I did more digging. I logged back into the DNA website and started researching Vanessa's matches on her maternal side. Because she was only a half-sister to me, the site would show relatives she didn't share with me. It didn't take long to find a first cousin, a woman named Sarah. Her online profile was public, and through it, I found her mother, Vanessa's aunt. A few more clicks led me to a name, Catherine Miller. An old obituary for Catherine's father mentioned her as his only daughter. An online search for Catherine Miller and my father's name yielded nothing, but a search for Catherine Miller and his old architecture firm's location brought up a few public records. She had lived just a few towns over. She had passed away 5 years ago from cancer. She had never married and had only one child, a daughter named Vanessa. My heart ached for this woman I'd never met, a woman my father had presumably loved, or at least used, and then abandoned to raise their child alone while he played happy families with his wife. He had not only betrayed my mother, but he had also cheated Vanessa out of knowing her own mother, all to protect his reputation. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about a web of lies that had hurt multiple people. My resolve hardened. The final piece of my preparation was physical. I went to a print shop and had the DNA results professionally printed and enlarged on high-quality paper. I had one copy showing the half-sister designation next to Vanessa's name, and another showing the shared centimorgan count with the scientific explanation below it. I sealed them in a large manila envelope. This would be my visual aid, my undeniable proof. On the day of the anniversary party, I felt a strange sense of calm. The nervous, anxious girl who had hoped for a surprise party was gone. In her place was a woman with a purpose. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant black dress. It was professional, serious, and somber. I was not there to celebrate. I was there to officiate a funeral, the funeral of my family's lies. When I arrived at the restaurant, I was greeted with forced smiles and awkward hugs. Debra. We were so worried, my mother said, her eyes flitting around nervously. I'm fine, Mom, I said, my voice cool and even, just been busy with work. My father gave me a searching look. You look nice, he said, clearly unsure of how to approach me. Vanessa was already there, glowing in a ridiculously vibrant red dress, soaking up the attention. She gave me a dismissive wave. Glad you could make it, she said, as if she were the host. I simply nodded and took my seat at the long, beautifully decorated table. I placed the large manila envelope on the empty chair beside me. It sat there, a silent, ominous presence, throughout the appetizers and small talk. I ate little, spoke only when spoken to, and watched them all perform. I watched them laugh, tell stories, and toast to 35 years of happiness. With every clink of their glasses, my resolve grew stronger. The time was coming. The stage was set. The truth was waiting in its envelope, ready for its grand entrance. The main course was cleared away, and the waiters began pouring champagne for the final toasts. The mood in the private dining room was warm and celebratory. My father's business partner had just finished a rambling, sentimental speech about Arthur's integrity and dedication, both to his work and his family. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My father, basking in the praise, stood up, his arm around my mother's shoulders. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. 35 years, it's hard to believe, but I couldn't have done any of it without this incredible woman by my side and our two wonderful daughters who are my greatest pride. He looked from Vanessa to me, his gaze lingering on me for a fraction of a second too long, a hint of pleading in his eyes. He knew something was wrong, but he had no idea what was coming. Vanessa, of course, gave a toast next. It was polished and charming, filled with anecdotes about their perfect family life and how inspiring their parents' love story was. The guests were captivated. They saw a portrait of a happy, successful family. They had no idea the canvas was rotten. As she sat down to a round of applause, my father smiled at me. "Debra, would you like to say anything?" This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. All eyes turned to me. The room fell silent with anticipation. I could feel my heart thumping, a steady, powerful rhythm. I calmly picked up the manila envelope from the chair beside me and stood up. "Actually, I would," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the warm ambience of the room. I didn't raise my glass. "I'd like to talk about family, about truth, and about secrets." A nervous flicker crossed my mother's face. My father's smile tightened. "For my entire life," I continued, my eyes locked on my parents, "I've felt like a piece of our family puzzle didn't quite fit. I always thought the problem was with me. But I recently discovered that the problem wasn't the piece. It was the picture on the box." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The other guests were looking confused, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. For my 30th birthday a few weeks ago, my family threw a surprise party. The only surprise was that it was for my sister. I let that sink in before turning my gaze to Vanessa. "Congratulations, by the way, on your promotion, Vanessa. It was a wonderful party." Vanessa flushed, a mixture of pride and embarrassment. My mother shot me a warning look, a silent plea to stop. I ignored her, but that night led me to a discovery, a family secret, one that I think is important to share, especially on a night where we are celebrating honesty and commitment. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the first printed document. I held it up for the table to see. "I recently received the results of a DNA test," I said, my voice never wavering. "Vanessa and I both happen to use the same service, and it turns out we're not sisters." I looked directly at Vanessa, whose smug expression had dissolved into pure confusion. "We're half-sisters." A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's face went white as a sheet. My father looked like he had been punched in the stomach. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Don't believe me," I said, my voice hardening. I pulled out the second document, the one with the scientific data. "According to Genesis Labs, Vanessa and I share approximately 1,750 centimorgans of DNA. We are a paternal match." I placed the documents on the table with a soft, definitive thud. Paternal, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it means we share a father. I turned my full attention to Arthur, my father. His face had crumpled. The proud, confident man from the toasts was gone, replaced by a terrified, guilty old man. But we do not share a mother. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by a choked sob from my mother. Vanessa stared at me, then at my parents, her face a mask of disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's crazy. Mom," she looked at Margaret, but my mother couldn't meet her eyes. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth. "Her name was Catherine Miller, wasn't it, Dad?" I pressed on, my voice cold as ice. She was Vanessa's mother, a woman you had an affair with and then abandoned to raise your child while you built this perfect life, this perfect lie, with your wife. And you, Mom, I said, turning to Margaret, you went along with it. You raised your husband's illegitimate child and pretended she was your own. But you could never treat us the same, could you? You had to overcompensate. You had to make Vanessa the star, the golden child, to make the lie feel true, and I was just collateral damage. The family portrait had not just been shattered, it had been incinerated. The guests were frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. My father's business partner was staring at him with utter disgust. Vanessa looked between my father's ashen face and my mother's weeping form, the truth dawning on her in a wave of sickening realization. Is it true? She demanded, her voice rising to a shrill cry. Is it true? My father could only nod, his entire body shaking, and in that moment, years of carefully constructed lies crumbled into dust. The party was over. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Vanessa let out a sound that was half scream, half sob, and pushed her chair back so violently it crashed to the floor. She stared at Arthur with a look of such profound betrayal that it was almost painful to watch. My whole life, she shrieked, her voice cracking. My whole life has been a lie? She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed her purse and fled the room, leaving a trail of stunned silence and wreckage behind her. The guests, mortified, began to murmur excuses and gather their things, avoiding eye contact with any of us. They filed out of the room like people evacuating a disaster zone, their sympathy and well wishes from earlier curdled into pity and disgust. Within minutes, the only people left at the long, beautifully set table were me, my father, and my mother. The remnants of the celebratory dinner, half-empty glasses, crumpled napkins, the untouched anniversary cake, felt like relics from another lifetime. My father, Arthur, finally seemed to find his voice. It was a weak, pathetic whisper. Debra, how could you? How could I? The audacity of the question after everything was breathtaking. I felt a cold, clear calm settle over me. The anger was gone, replaced by a vast, empty finality. How could I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. You're the one who had an affair. You're the one who brought an illegitimate child into our home and lied about it for 30 years. You're the one who, along with her, I gestured to my weeping mother, created a family dynamic so toxic that your actual daughter was made to feel like a stranger in her own home. You're asking me how I could tell the truth? You should be asking yourselves how you could live a lie for so long. My mother looked up, her face streaked with tears and mascara. We did it to protect the family, she sobbed. I loved your father. I didn't want to lose everything. I tried. I tried to love her like my own. You tried by pushing me away, I stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact. You didn't protect the family, Mom. You preserved a marriage. There's a difference. A family is built on trust, and this family was built on nothing but deceit. I looked at them both, these two people who were essentially strangers to me now. The power they had held over me my entire life was gone. I was no longer the quiet daughter desperate for their approval. I was just a woman who had finally learned the truth. I had nothing more to say to them. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the polished floor. I'm done, I said. Don't call me, don't text me, don't try to explain. There is nothing left to say. My father started to get up, his hand outstretched. Debra, please. I just looked at him, and for the first time, I think he truly saw the stranger I had become. He sank back into his chair, defeated. I walked out of the restaurant and didn't look back. The night air was cool and clean, and as I took my first breath of it, I felt a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying for 30 years begin to lift from my shoulders. The following weeks were a strange mix of turmoil and peace. My phone was bombarded with calls and texts from Arthur and Margaret, ranging from furious to pleading to sorrowful. I blocked their numbers. Vanessa sent me one long, rambling email. It was a confused mess of anger at me for the public humiliation and anger at our parents for the deception. She said she was staying with a friend and didn't know what to do. I replied with a single sentence. I'm sorry you were hurt by their lies, and I hope you find your truth. I meant it. She was as much a victim of their choices as I was. Chloe was my rock through it all. She let me cry when I needed to and celebrated with me when I had my first weekend completely free of family-induced anxiety. Slowly, I began to build a new life, one not defined by the shadows of my past. I started reconnecting with my maternal cousins, who, after hearing the full story from a distant aunt, reached out with support and understanding. They shared stories and pictures of my grandparents, filling in the gaps of a history that I now realized had been partially kept from me. I don't know what will happen to Arthur, Margaret, and Vanessa. I have heard through the grapevine that my parents are selling their house. Whether they are separating or just trying to escape the ghosts of their lies, I don't know, and I find that I don't really care. Their story is no longer my story. My life is my own now. It's quiet, it's orderly, and it's honest. Some nights, I still feel a phantom pain, a ghost of the girl who just wanted her parents to see her. But then I look around my peaceful apartment, at the life I've curated for myself based on what I value, and I feel a profound sense of peace. The truth didn't just set me free, it allowed me to finally be born. My 30th birthday wasn't the day I was celebrated, but it was the day I truly began to live.